culture. Don't watch TV. Don't read magazines. Don't even listen to NPR.
Time comes when silence is betrayal. More for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. Think for yourself. Question authority.
This code has been compromised.
All right, we're back, Truth Seeker. It is Wednesday, May 27th, 2020. We got 2 hours left in the program, and joining us now is our special guest. His YouTube channel is Eric777 if you want to check it out. And from what I've seen of his channel, he focuses on exposing the Jesuits and their agenda, which is something I'm very focused on right now, so I thought I'd have him join us. So thanks for being here, Eric, and you got the floor if you just want to run with it.
Oh, thanks, Zach. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invite, and you've been doing some great work with connecting this pandemic to the Jesuits with the Gematria. I'm not going to. I'm still have quite a bit to learn with Gematria. I'm not going to pretend that I'm on your level or anything like that in terms of the decoding with the numbers. But no, fantastic job connecting 201 to was it Ignatius Loyola?
Right.
Or Ignatius, right at 20 equals 201, and that that was like the simulated. 3 months before the initial outbreak, they're telling us everything that's going on right now. Advocating with the social distancing and declaring emergency orders and the merging of the military and the private sector, like we're seeing now. It was all foreshadowed, and I had a video on my channel I recommend your viewers check out. Tony Fauci, who I think is a Jesuit, and that's why in my videos I put SJ, which is abbreviation for the Society of Jesus after his name. But he gave a speech at Jesuit Georgetown University, which is kind of like the Order's power center in the United States. Georgetown University was created the same year that the United States Constitution was written, I believe 1789. And Georgetown University had the identical seal to the United States government. Still does to this day. The founder of Georgetown University, his name was John Carroll, S.J., one of the most powerful figures in America at the time of the Revolution. And his nephew became the first mayor of Washington, D.C. And I call Washington, D.C. the District of Catholics because it's in between the states Maryland and Virginia, kind of like the Virgin Mary. And you have like the Vatican obelisk is there right at Washington, D.C. as well. And the U.S. Capitol building is an almost identical carbon copy model of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And Washington, if you look at back in I think in the 1600s, the land now known as Washington was called Rome on the Potomac. That's just some background info. But Fauci was speaking at the Order's Power Center, Georgetown University, January 11th, 2017. And he said that they're absolutely certain that there's going to be a surprise outbreak that's going to ravage the world during the Trump administration. The entire thing, has been foreshadowed. Just fantastic work connecting it with the Gematria as well. And and I'm looking into now the significance of 84 to the Jesuit order. And I think it's interesting that, Pope Francis is in his 84th year.
And
this is all,
just a few things you can look into that are huge with the Jesuits in 84. I mean, it's a number that comes up again and again. Ignatius of Loyola died 84 days from his birthday, and of course he's the founder. One of the first headlines when Pope Francis became Pope was that instead of driving around the fancy Pope mobile, he was driving a 1984. I forget what kind of car it was, but it's like a fudzy-dudzy car, since that's how he kind of models himself as this humble man who lives in the small shack and drives the old 1984 beat-up junker. But his birth numerology is also 84. And if you just go through the history of popes, you'll just see how many died in connection to 84 date numerology in their 84th year of existence. It's a number that comes up again and again and again. And Anthony Fauci's been there, the head of the NIH, since 1984, of course. But not to cut you off.
Well, actually, it was 1984. Sorry to cut you off for a second. It was 1984 that the United States military government acknowledged the sovereign state of Vatican City. That was 1984 when Ronald Reagan was president.
And for the record, the Catholic Church, if you put the in front of it, the Catholic Church is 84. If you put the in front of Jesuit Order, the Jesuit Order is 84. United States of America is 84. So again, when you learn this code, you see why they do things the years they do. Just like how last week on May 20th, the former Superior General of the Jesuits just died at age 84. So, Eric?
Oh, it's very intriguing. The Jesuits, in terms of Kabbalah and esotericism, the Jesuits are very esoteric.
Mm-hmm.
I view them almost as esoteric sorcerers, in a sense. They're very, very well versed in the occult studies, in philosophy, science. If people just look at the Wikipedia page of the amount of Jesuit scientists there have been, I think they'd be mind blown. Jesuit, you can trace. I know Anastasius Kircher, S.J., was a powerful Jesuit in the 1600s who really revitalized the study of Egyptology, and he was big into Kabbalah and Gematria as well. These are very sophisticated thinkers. They're essentially the Navy SEALs of the Vatican or the Roman Empire. And what the Vatican is today, is just an extension of the ancient military Rome, which ruled the world from, the time of 400 BC, at least. And there was a CIA agent, E. Howard Hunt. He's, I'm sure you're aware of, I'm sure your viewers have heard of him too. The character Agent Ethan Hunt from the Mission Impossible movies is kind of like an ode to E. Howard Hunt, who is this notorious CIA agent. But he said in 1998 that the Jesuits form the greatest intelligence service in the world and always have. And that came from a notorious CIA agent. It just seems that many people in the alternative media are not aware of quotes like this and aren't aware of the power that the Jesuits yield in general. Especially going to America, almost every single alphabet agency of government, if you look back to who were the initial founders, you'll trace it back to the Roman Catholic Church and the Jesuits, almost every time. For instance, we're seeing right now at the CDC, the current director of the CDC, Robert Redfield, has 2 degrees from the Jesuits at Georgetown University. And recently, when he was giving his testimony, they had it over Skype calls last week, but you could even see Robert Redfield. You can see 2 photos of the Pope in his house while he was testifying to the Congress. So he's the current CDC director. But if you look back, who founded the CDC? The founder of this Center for Disease Control was a man named Joseph Walter Moonton, who had 2 degrees from the Jesuits at Marquette University. That's one of their schools in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And another interesting correlation in America, if you look at every single Federal Reserve Bank, there's 12 Federal Reserve Banks, much how there's 12 disciples of Jesus. They kind of made a sacrilegious or play on the Bible with the Federal Reserve. And according to Richard F. Siren, who is Jesuit educated at Boston College, he was an assistant to Paul Volcker when he was the chairman of the Federal Reserve. And Richard Siren then became, I think he was the head of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac during the 2008 recession. Trained by Jesuits at Boston College. This guy's a Knight of Malta as well. But this comes from the book Secrets of the Temple by William Grider. I have this documented on my website on Reddit, Jesuit World Order. But Richard Siren compares the Federal Reserve System to the Catholic Church. He says it works just like the Catholic Church. I recommend people check out that quote. You know, every single city where there's a Federal Reserve Bank, you know, there's a Jesuit university.
That's very interesting.
Right by. And if you know the history of the Jesuit order, that's how they've historically, you know, conquered nations and states wherever they go. They infiltrate through their schools, which are in reality intelligence centers or fortresses. Because, you know, the Jesuits are a military organization. They're not religious whatsoever. Well, they use religion as a front, but ultimately they're a military organization.
Question: are you aware of the 33-day Pope and what's curious about the last day he lived on this earth?
Oh, absolutely. The Jesuit order's birthday. That also the birthday of Google. What was that? November
September
27th or
27th.
October 27th?
September 27th. Yeah, because
September 27th. Yeah.
he when he became Pope, he said his first order of business was to clean up the corruption in the Vatican Bank, and then he goes to bed on the Jesuit order's birthday and never wakes up again. So.
And actually, this came from it's incredibly fishy, and this actually came from a Jesuit's book. I think this was a Jesuit named Raymond Shruth, S.J. He wrote a book called The American Jesuits. Or actually, no, this came from his book just called The Jesuits. He also wrote a book called The American Jesuits. But in his book, The Jesuits, people can find this on the resource website Library Genesis or libgen.is. But if you type in Control F, John Paul I, you'll see that Pope JP1 was actually going to have a meeting with the highest members of the Jesuit order the day after he died.
Huh.
Which I also think is incredibly suspicious. And absolutely, like the Vatican Bank, you know, doubtlessly is the reason for that he died. Actually, I just read a book on that whole scandal that involved Roberto Calvi and Michelle Sindona. I put it on my archive.org page, which is titled Eric Bowman 77. People want to search that up on archive.org. But that book's called God's Banker by Rupert Cornwell. It was written in 1984. But, yeah, doubtlessly, I think that was to do with the Vatican Bank. You know, without a shadow of a doubt. And you know that shows also the Masonic hand. And actually, you know, I'll pull this up here on my blog because this is a very interesting source because this came from a Masonic author himself. I don't know, have you heard of the name Jean-Marie Ragon?
I'm not familiar. Ragon? No, I'm not familiar.
I guess his last name is spelled Ragon.
Okay.
But he was a French Masonic author who wrote in the middle of the 1800s. But he actually, I have this. This is on my website. People type in. I have this titled "French Freemason Jean-Marie Ragon wrote how the Jesuits completely controlled Freemasonry in 1841." But he says straight up here that the G in the Freemasonic logo and the logo of Freemasonry stands for the General of the Jesuit Order.
Huh.
You know, which is very fascinating. And actually, this is documented. I found this in a book titled Scotch Rite Masonry Profusely Illustrated. It was written back in 1888 by a Jonathan Blanchard. But he shows that in the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite, they use the Jesuit motto, Ad Morgium El Gloriam, Del Gloriam.
Right.
So very interestingly. And that scandal that involved the bankers, Michelle Sindona and Roberto Calvi, that had to do with the P2 Freemasonic Lodge, which both those men were members of. And, you know, it came out that, you know, all the highest ranking Vatican clergy and cardinals were members of the secret P2 Freemasonic Lodge. So that, you know, that's a whole dialogue. The Catholic Church, just like the Roman God Janus, the two-faced God, they have an open but false policy. You know, with almost in terms of every, you know, every subject you can conceive. They're very two-faced. So openly, you know, you can read Catholic Church bulls that have been written condemning Freemasonry, but they secretly and covertly control it.
Right. And I think that's very clear just with regards to Washington, D.C., which was once the Catholic colony policed by the Jesuits, and now it's named after a Scottish Rite Freemason and the way they share mottos. So I think it's...
Well, actually, I don't know if people know this. This is even, like, I know National Public Radio even covered this. I saw the Washington Post even mention this. This is like a standard encyclopedic history, but George Washington, the Scottish Rite Freemason, his famous rules of civility that he supposedly wrote when he was only 16 years old were in reality plagiarized from French Jesuits
Huh.
in the 17th century.
Huh. That's interesting. That's interesting.
And George Washington was said to call a Jesuit to his deathbed, that being Leonard Neal, S.J. It's documented that George Washington was lifelong friends with the Carrolls. I mentioned John Carroll earlier in the show, the Jesuit priest who founded Georgetown University.
Right.
There was also Charles Carroll, who was educated by Jesuits in France for over 17 years. He was a big aristocratic landowner in Maryland at the time of the American Revolution, was one of the primary financiers of the Continental Army. And then there was Daniel Carroll, who was also educated by Jesuits, and the Capitol building today was on his property. Prior to the Revolution.
Awesome, yeah.
So and if people, I have this in the post I did on the first mayor of Washington D.C. But this photo, I guess they say photos speak a million words. But on the gravestone of Robert Brent, who was the first mayor of Washington D.C., you can see the Jesuit IHS Sunburst logo on the Mayor Brent's gravestone. And here's a really interesting quote here. This came from Appleton's Encyclopedia of American Biography, written in 1887, pages 538 and 539. This is what it says of the Jesuit priest John Carroll. Quote, "No greater power of combined wealth, intellect, and enthusiasm existed anywhere in America than the union of the Carrolls and the Jesuits in Maryland in the person of John Carroll." End quote.
For the record, John Carroll founded Georgetown when he was 54 years old, and John Carroll equals 54, as does Jesuit order. They're both 54.
Wow, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it shows that it's all by the code. These guys are Kabbalists.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
That's a very interesting connection there.
The Supreme General who just died last week, his name is 54 in the same cipher. That's a huge number there with them. The Jesuits 54. But by the way, just using the alphabetic order, the word sun equals 54, which is their logo. The IHS inside the sun.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, I believe the sun, or the 19th tarot card is the sun card, which I think is more Jesuitical coding into this pandemic.
Well, that would make a lot of sense. They do call it COVID-19, and they did give us the Gregorian calendar, the Catholic Church, which is based on the solar cycle. And speaking of which, Pope...
that was a Jesuit. The Jesuit's name was Christopher Clavius, S.J.
Huh.
Yeah. Wrote the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah, Pope Gregory III, that the Gregorian calendar is named after. Gregory III equals 83. He died at 83 years old in months, which means he was in his 84th year of his life when he died as well. So that number one more time.
So it's the power that the Catholic Church and the Jesuits yield, is undeniable. Especially when you start looking at a prominent symbol, or the official symbol of the ancient Roman Empire was the fasces, where the root word fascism comes from. I'm sure people type in fasces U.S. House of Representatives, you'll see they're kind of like a bundle of sticks with kind of like an axe protruding out the top with like a wreath decorated on the outside of them. The symbol is kind of the ancient Roman concept of strength through unity, or we all must submit to the power of the one or the state that yields the fasces axe, kind of the symbol of power. But there's two fasces actually in the U.S. House of Representatives. Every time any U.S. political figure is speaking in the House, he's speaking a lot in between the two Roman fasces, which are symbols of Romans' military conquest, historically. If you went back into ancient Rome, it was the lictors, who are kind of like our modern-day SWAT teams, or militarized police. The lictors would carry around the fasces, and that's what they would use, to enforce the law, and make sure everyone was submitting to the Roman dictator's decrees. But the fasces are in the U.S. House of Representatives. Everyone should check that out. And they're all, it's really all over the United States. You know, I'm talking about state courthouses, federal courthouses, state Supreme Court houses. Just look at the logo of the United States Tax Court. You'll see what I'm talking about. The Roman fasces is right, you know, they're not hiding it whatsoever. It's right in the center of the United States Tax Court logo. And, you know, the United States Tax Court has, I think 80% of the judges are openly Roman Catholic. Almost all of them went to Jesuit schools, like the Chief Justice, Maurice Foley. And now you look at the seal for the United States administrative courts. The seal has the Roman fasces right on it, as well as this fasces is on the logo of the Knights of Columbus, which alongside the Jesuits are another powerful Roman Catholic military order. Like Jeb Bush is a 4th degree Knight of Columbus currently right now, and so was the recent Speaker of the House, John Boehner, who also was educated by Jesuits at Xavier University. You know, it's incredible. Like, this fasces is on the United States of the National Sheriff's Association official seal. You know, they're not hiding it whatsoever. So I recommend people check out that symbol, because that fasces is the symbol of ancient Rome. And that's why, you know, Hitler used it, because, you know, Hitler was openly trying to recreate the Germanic Roman Empire that was created by Charlemagne. You know, this fasces was used in Mussolini. It was the official symbol of Mussolini's fascist Italy. This Roman fasces seal. Yeah, and this is, you know, it's incredible occulted history. Like, think of I don't know if people, have you seen like what the United States Supreme Court looks like, Zach?
You mean in terms of the people who make up the Supreme Court?
Well, yeah, or that too. Yeah, like well, I think right now, I think there's, in terms of judges, I think there's 6 open Roman Catholics with 3 Jewish justices.
Right.
And the 3 Jewish justices have all been honored by the Jesuits in subtle ways, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who received the Stein Prize from Jesuit Fordham University in 2001. And her late husband, Martin Ginsburg, was a professor at Georgetown University, which is, of course, Jesuit. And Stephen Breyer also received an award from the Jesuits at Fordham, that being the Stein Prize. So the point being, so you see, they control all of even the non-Catholic justices as well. The supposed now, quote, Protestant Supreme Court Justice Neil Garouche was educated by the Jesuits at Georgetown Prep School, probably the most elitist prep school in the entire United States. So they got it under complete control.
Do you remember
in terms of demographics? But I was just going to say, in terms of the building architecture, and they admit this even on the official architect of the Capitol website, the Supreme Court building itself is an ancient Roman temple.
Right.
If you look at on the west entrance of the building, you can see 2 Roman centurions, you know, or Roman military officers, and they're gripping the fasces in their right hands. So it's incredible, like, when you start to connect the symbolism, and it alludes to me, like, at least that, like, America is like the new Roman Republic. You know, just there's been many books written on this. I got a few on my archive.org page. Like one I can think of now was The Roman Republic and the American Republic. The subtitle is Perils of Empire. That's a good book that people should read. But if you look at these, there's so many historical similarities too. You know, how the United States initially, you know, spread out as big as it did, and how Rome and the U.S. have, you know, essentially dominated the world order since they've been created, and all the Roman symbolism that the United States government has incorporated into itself. James Edward Quigley. This came from an article titled "Quigley as an Wonderful Growth of the Roman Catholic Church" from the Chicago Tribune, May 5th, 1903. So this is over 100 years ago now, or 120 years ago. But this is what the Archbishop said. He said, "Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world," talking about the United States. "Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place." You know, this is absolutely true. You know, the entire world is on the U.S. dollar. You know, that's the world's reserve currency. The United States are now essentially the policemen of the world. There's even a Roman Catholic archdiocese for the United States military. It has their own specially funded taxpayer archdiocese for the jurisdiction of the United States military. And that's called the Archdiocese of the Military Services. Continuing here, this is what the Archbishop says. The West will dominate the country, and what I've seen of the Western patriarchal schools has proved that the generation which follows us will be exclusively Catholic. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. Should I keep going, or do you have anything to say? Or anything
well,
to,
your
to
pause is good because we got about 15 seconds before the commercial break. The commercial breaks are about 2 minutes long. And so if you just want to pause right there, the music will kick on any second. We'll be gone for 2 minutes, and then we'll come back. And I'm just going to keep going, man, because you are a waterfall of good information. So I think everyone's appreciating what you're sharing right now.
Oh, thank you, Zach. I appreciate it, and feel free to jump in and cut me off every now and then too if you have something to add.
Sure.
You got lots of great stuff to say too, and I appreciate all the work you do.
Sure.
Thanks again for having me on.
Yeah, we'll be right back, everybody. Sit tight.
Discover the extraordinary powers of intuitive healing with pain transmutation, a method of holistic healing for the human soul, body, mind, and emotions. If you are looking for answers and a deep understanding of how to help yourself and the people around you to live a happier, healthier life, this is the right place for you. Learn how to read your soul's history in the Akashic Records. Remove negative energy attachments from your astral body and start the process of inner and outer pain transmutation. Join Pain Transmutation Community to get started on the path of intuitive healing. Change your energetic state. Manifest new and exciting experiences. Re-energize your life and build inspiring connections with others in our community.
Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies in a capsule.
It's a great product. And the one thing I like about it the most is that when you open the bottles, you can smell like the scent of the fruits and veggies. It's no genius thing to it. It's really just fruits and veggies, which everyone needs. And you guys put it in a way where you can take it easy and you can get it, and it's natural, and that's what I like about it. I like the product, and I've taken it, and it's definitely made me feel a lot better. I am a healthy person to begin with, but it's definitely good prevention, and it's definitely gives me energy, and I feel like it's a natural thing. I like it. I really do.
For a limited time, use discount code TALK to receive a 50% discount on your first preferred whole health system and have it shipped to you free. Call 1-800-246-8751 or go online to balanceofnature.com. Again, use discount code TALK.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Jim Ram, retired. In early 2012, I was facing a laundry list of chronic health conditions that my physician was telling me were incurable. I knew there had to be a better way, and I learned how I could reverse every one of my ailments with science-based, clinically verified medical nutrition. In just a few months, I was able to reverse high blood pressure, gastric reflux, sleep apnea, arthritis, degenerative disc disease, heart arrhythmia, AFib, and many more. And I've lost over 70 pounds and kept it off. Now I'm hosting a radio program that's dedicated to helping my listeners do the same. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you're sick of being used as an ATM by your doctor, then you'll want to tune into the Your DIY Health radio program here on Truth Frequency Radio every Thursday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern and 6 to 8 a.m. Pacific.
No hate, no hype, no fear. We are your protection from deception.
All right, we're back. Truth Seeker. It's the midway point. We got an hour and a half left. We got our special guest with us, Eric Bowman. His YouTube channel, if you want to check it out, Eric777, doing really great work and sharing with us some of his knowledge tonight. Eric, are you still with us?
Oh, yeah, I'm still here, Zach.
Sure. Just one thing I was trying to chime in with is, do you remember when they had the Brett Kavanaugh versus Christine Blasey Ford testimony?
I do, yes.
And he was talking about how much he liked to drink beer. For the record, that was on the Jesuit establishment date as well, September 27th, the good little Catholic boy Kavanaugh. So, again, when you pay attention to that date every single year, September 27th, they have some Jesuit-related ritual. And in 2018, it was the Supreme Court Theater. So,
actually, when Kavanaugh came out at that time, I know Vice covered this. Kavanaugh said, "What happens at Georgetown Prep stays at Georgetown."
Right,
Prep.
exactly.
That's the Jesuit school in D.C., or their powerful prep school there.
Yeah. All right,
that says a lot about Donald Trump. If you look at who have his two Supreme Court picks been, both have been educated by Jesuits.
Gorsuch,
Neil
right?
Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh.
And both installed by the numbers. And just with regards to the whole ritual right now with the Jesuits, again, coronavirus in Gematria sums to 56, Society of Jesus 56, Washington, D.C. 56. And when you look back at Trump, he attended the Jesuit University Fordham in 1964, which is 56 years before 2020 when all this is going on. And probably the governor that you've seen the most of during the time of this has been Andrew Cuomo, who also went to Fordham, who's the 56th governor of New York. And then you have Jesuit-educated Gavin Newsom in California, who came out and said that 56% of Californians will have coronavirus in 8 weeks. That was his quote. And of course, 8 weeks is 56 days. So this 56 number is everywhere, and I can't stand the Donald Trump people. I mean, to me, it's been so obvious that he's a puppet on strings since he began running for president. But with this coronavirus thing going on right now, and just seeing all the 56s and the fact that he attended the Jesuit University Fordham in 64, 56 years before all this, it should show people that these people truly are born for the throne. They're chosen, and we're living out a planned agenda that's been planned decades in advance by things such as the Jesuit order. And
absolutely, just really well said there, Zach. And these guys are absolutely groomed in to become president, and all throughout the world. Like, think about Trump and Hillary are related to each other. That on that alone, they're distant cousins.
Right.
You can see photos of them together, and this is, I'd say, in terms of just again, photos speak 1,000 words. The event, I think that definitively shows the power that the Roman Catholic Church yields in the political arena is the Alfred E. Smith dinner that takes place every election cycle. This is when the two candidates get together and they kind of make jokes and roast each other. But it's a Roman Catholic event distinctly named after Alfred E. Smith, who was the governor of New York back in the 1920s, who ran for president in 1928 and lost to Herbert Hoover. And they kind of immortalized him since then with this Alfred E. Smith dinner. But you can see there's a famous photo that takes place every single election cycle where you can see the two political candidates, one from the Republican, one from the Democrat. You can see Trump and Clinton did it this year. Obama and Romney did it the election cycle before. The two candidates get in between the Archbishop of New York, and they're just laughing their asses off at the camera.
Right. That was October.
When George Bush was going, him and Al Gore are actually even shaking their hands in front of Archbishop Edward Egan, who has this kind of devilish grin on his face while they're shaking.
Sure. That was October 20th, 2016, which was a date with 46 numerology. The word Catholic equals 46, like how they have 46 books in the Catholic Old Testament, kind of like how JFK was killed at age 46. And I am wondering about old Joe Biden, if they might install Sleepy Joe in there as the 46th president just because he's Catholic. There's only been one Catholic president to date, and that was JFK. He was number 35. If you run Catholic forwards, it's 35. If you run it in reverse, it's 46. And the date of that picture with Hillary and Trump at the Alfred E. dinner, that was from a date with 46 numerology. October 20th is also the day leaving 72 days left in the year. Jesuit order is 54 forwards, 72 in reverse, just like the Superior General who died last week. His name's 54 forwards, 72 in reverse. So yeah, absolutely. I do remember that story very well from October 20th, 2016. You might also recall when Donald Trump went to the Vatican and posed with Pope Francis and Ivanka and Melania. Do you remember that one?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and his wife is one of the, I think she's only like the second or third openly Catholic first lady as well.
I didn't catch that about her, but that was May 24th, 2017. That's the 144th day of the year. If you just use the alphabetic order, Jesuit order is 144. So on the 144th day of the year, with the first publicly Jesuit pope, you got Trump with that sinister look on his face next to the Pope who looked like he was pouty, and the two ladies, Melania and Ivanka, who looked like they were dressed for a funeral. So, again, just when you know the code, you see through the rituals. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this either, but Pope Francis is the 266th Pope, and he's the first publicly Jesuit Pope. The IHS inside their logo in Latin stands for Isus Hominum Salvator, which in Gematria sums to 266, the big way, and 122, the small way. Again, Pope Francis is the 266th Pope, and Pope Francis equals 122. So again, when you learn this code of letters and numbers, you just see through every action by the Jesuits and how it's all perfectly coordinated and synced up. And I suspect that Pope Francis isn't really the first Jesuit Pope, but for him to be said that he is, you can understand why they do it with number 266. It's the number that represents what's in their logo. So I'll shut up now and I'll give you the floor again. So take it away.
No, really well said, Zach. You know, I got to still learn more about the number code, but you know, it all ties in. You know, and keep up the great work on that. You know, and when you add the Vatican angle on top, you know, because the Jesuits are, you know, like esoteric, like sorcerers. You know, Helena Blavatsky. You know, lots of people think she's a witch herself, but in her book Isis Unveiled, she accuses the Jesuits of being like black magicians. Like the biggest black magician in the world. And she also even wrote a separate article called, I think, Theosophy or Jesuitism, where she goes into more of accusations of the Jesuits being black magicians. She actually even says that certain Jesuits will hold like magnetic chains together.
Huh.
And like, you know, if they want to like negatively influence someone, supposedly tap into, you know, like the astral realm, and stuff like that. You know, it's very interesting reading, especially coming from Blavatsky, because she's an occultist, seeing what she has to say about the Jesuits. But, the numbers code, you know, is very fascinating. And just before I go in again, here with some info I pulled up, could you just reiterate like the event 201 significance to Ignatius of Loyola?
Sure. So
as the founder of the Jesuits.
If you look this up in history, when Pope Clement XIV banned the Jesuits, they were supposedly saved by Catherine the Great, and supposedly the number of Jesuits that she saved were 201. And again, recently we had the Event 201 coronavirus outbreak simulation on October 18th, 2019, that was also the exact same day the Military World Games took place in Wuhan, China. And if you look up the history of the Military World Games, they began in Rome in the year 95. And 95 matters because the Jesuits' date of establishment, September 27th, is the day leaving 95 days left in the year. And the Jesuits were originally created to kill Martin Luther and his followers for writing the 95 Thesis against the Catholic Church. And, for example, Anthony Fauci, who no doubt is a Jesuit, his name Fauci equals 95. His birth numerology is 95. Martin Luther King Jr., who took a name related to Martin Luther, who led the Protestant formation, Martin Luther King Jr. was killed on the 95th day of the year, April 4th, 1968, which was a leap year. Also, it was a 95 date numerology. So that's the 95 piece. As for the 201 piece, which you asked about, in Gematria, the Jesuit order equals 201. Ignatius of Loyola, 201, that's their founder. Jorge Mario Bergoglio's 201. Jose Joaquin de Ferrer, who is Catholic and very possibly a Jesuit, who coined the term corona as it relates to solar eclipses, his name is 201. On his Wikipedia page, he's doing the hidden hand, like how Fauci and Pope Francis, the first publicly Jesuit pope born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, like to do that hidden hand. And the Holy Bible is also 201. And something I learned in recent days, going through a little bit of history, when Washington, D.C. became an independent city-state on February 21st, 1871, by the way, Catholic 71, when that happened, the name of that act, which I cannot remember off the top of my head right now, but the name of that act also equals 201, and I suspect that act in 1871, a Catholic number with a 201 name, I'm suspecting that act had a lot of Jesuit Catholic influence behind it. A lot of people say that when that happened, Washington, D.C. went back directly under control of the Vatican, which seems very probable to me.
Well, I believe that's the Organic Act.
It is, yep.
1871.
The official name of that equals 201.
Oh, very fascinating. Well, you know, that's when Ulysses Grant became president.
Right.
You know, there's been many books written on this. Like one I recommend the viewers check out is called The Suppressed Truth About the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. That was written by a female author, Burke McCarty, in 1922. She shows that the Jesuits, had a significant role to play in Abraham Lincoln's assassination. And it wasn't just John Wilkes Booth, who the media tells you was like kind of like the lone assassin in that plot. The plot was actually hatched out of a family's house called the Surratt family, or Surratt Roman Catholics. One of the chief conspirators, John Surratt, actually was smuggled out of the United States as a priest, then went through Canada, and then went to the Vatican to join the Pope's voluntary Zouave army. Before he was spotted there and then shipped back to America to have a phony trial. And he had a Jesuit-trained lawyer, Richard T. Merrick, defending him. And then he lived off the rest of his life in the U.S. as a millionaire. But, Mary Surratt, the only accomplice who was executed for the Lincoln assassination, had like 9 Catholic priests testify to her goodwill and good character on her deathbed. And a lot of people don't know, during the Civil War, I actually think the Civil War was an attempt for the Vatican to kind of to polarize and break up the United States, and then to come in after the Civil War and incorporate it fully under the Organic Act. Because just very interestingly, the Pope at the time, Pius IX, people type in Pope Pius IX letters to Jefferson Davis, who is of course the president of the Confederate States of America. You see that the Pope was calling Jefferson Davis, your honorable and illustrious president. And he wasn't even acknowledging Abraham Lincoln's government. And at the time, you had the Archbishop of New York, Archbishop John Hughes. His nickname is John Dagger Hughes. Powerful American, kind of like the Pope of America at that time. The Archbishop of New York is kind of like the Pope of America position. But during the Civil War, he actually encouraged thousands of Irishmen who were predominantly Catholics in the North to actually not fight for the Union Army. So in the hopes that the Confederacy, there's a lot of history of that too, because if you look historically, the Roman Catholic Church was controlling the African slave trade. And that's documented well in a book called Slavery and Catholicism by Richard Roscoe Miller. So it's very interesting the dynamics that were going on during the Civil War, and afterwards, when I think the Jesuits killed Lincoln, they installed Ulysses Grant as president of the United States, and he was openly an honorary member of the Jesuits' Philodemic Society at Georgetown University, which I guess is their kind of like debating club. And you can see the occult symbolism the Jesuits use, because they use a hermetic caduceus as the symbol of that Philodemic Society. And, Ulysses Grant actually went to see the Pope after he left presidential office later in his life. I think he went on like a world tour in the 1880s and saw Pope Leo the 13th. It's very interesting. With John F. Kennedy, it's kind of like an enigma because why would the Vatican assassinate a Catholic president? John F. Kennedy was a Knight of Columbus. If you read some of his early speeches in the 60s, he's praising the Jesuit order. Like you can find a speech he gave at Boston College in 1960, where he was saying good things about the Vatican. But there was one, but John F. Kennedy was principled, and there was one speech he gave at the Rice Hotel in Houston. If you let me pull up the date of the speech, let me see if this has any significance. But John F. Kennedy actually said that he's not going to bow down to the Pope whatsoever. That John F. Kennedy said he's not going to give U.S. taxpayer dollars for Catholic schools, none whatsoever. He said there's going to be no U.S. ambassador to the Vatican while he's president. This would doubtlessly infuriate the hierarchy because they're expecting, big advancements to be made while one of their boys, John F. Kennedy, is president. John F. Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, was a powerful American Knight of Malta who was like a fascist. He was openly praising Adolf Hitler. But in the book, The Catholic Church in Hollywood by Alexander McGregor, when Joe Kennedy was chairman of RCA Pictures, he issued a memo within Hollywood so they could stop portraying Hitler in a negative light in Hollywood. So Kennedy came from a very powerful Catholic aristocratic background. He's a millionaire. Just with Hollywood side fact, an ordained Jesuit priest actually drafted the official Hollywood production code. His name was Daniel Aloysius Lord, S.J.
Huh.
That was also known as the Hays Code of 1930. Which a lot of people I'm sure aren't aware of. But John F. Kennedy, it's very interesting that he was saying, like, actually, so this was 1960. Let me see if I can get a date. This was at the Rice Hotel in Houston, Texas. But bow down to the Vatican. John F. Kennedy famously didn't allow Cardinal Francis Spellman to come to the White House. He didn't let the Cardinal Bagnozzi, the Archbishop of Washington, come to the White House. And I have this documented in a post I did called Jesuit-trained U.S. President Lyndon Johnson passed legislation giving unconstitutional federal funds to the Catholic Church after the Jesuits/CIA murdered John F. Kennedy for refusing to do so. That's the title of the post where I document this information. In 1964, J. Edgar Hoover actually received a sword of Ignatius Loyola from the Jesuit order, that being the FBI director, for his good role in the cover-up. And, it's kind of, brilliant for them. Lyndon Johnson comes in after Kennedy is popped, and he went to Jesuit Georgetown University, of course. Lyndon Johnson was sworn in on a Roman Catholic missal as he was taking the oath of the U.S. presidency. I think is an incredible fact. And, you can see photos of Lyndon Johnson with Pope Paul in New York City, 1965. Johnson then, after they popped Kennedy for refusing to give federal aid to the Catholic schools, Johnson passed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965, which gave billions of federal taxpayer dollars to Catholic schools all over the country, which are acting as like a fifth column for Rome's military empire. And Johnson also, his war on poverty started giving billions of tax dollars to Catholic charities and Catholic relief services and the likes like that. Actually, I don't know, does October 8th, 1965 has a significant numeral? That was the date that Lyndon Johnson met with Pope Paul VI in New York City.
I'll have to study it more, but October 8th just stands out on the surface because 108 is very important. There's 108 Catholic prayer beads, and it symbolizes geometry. There's probably a lot to it, so I'll go back and look at that event because I haven't researched that before. But just to tell you something you probably didn't know about the JFK assassination, it happened in the 187th year of the nation's existence, and all of these things equal 187. Society of Jesus, Washington, D.C., George Washington, ancient accepted Scottish rite of Freemasonry, which is what's etched on the House of the Temple in D.C., which shares the motto with the Jesuits, And if you look at Trump and the Pope right now, Donald Trump's birthday is June 14th, the flag's birthday, and Pope Francis's birthday is December 17th. That's a span of 187 days apart. It's just like why Trump had his GOP convention on July 18th, 18/7, 187, a span of 187 days from Inauguration Day. And now that I just see how it's all synced up with this coronavirus ritual that they're rolling out, Trump was 70 years old when he became president, and coronavirus is 70. And have you ever thought about QAnon? QAnon, which means Q Anonymous. And there's a cipher called Jewish Gematria. QAnon is 201 in that cipher. But QAnon, Anonymous is part of their name. And then Anonymous, they use the symbolism of Guy Fawkes, who was a Jesuit. So I'm starting to realize that
absolutely. No, fantastic. Yeah, Anonymous, I think they also use the Roman laurel wreath, which is a symbol of ancient military Rome. That's the symbol of the United Nations as well, and a whole bunch of other agencies. But Anonymous uses that Roman symbolism as well. Yeah. And they even have that question mark on the center too, telling you that they work for the Vatican.
Right. So yeah.
That's why they're anonymous.
The JFK, I wrote a lot about the JFK assassination in my first book, and it's all synced up with his visit with the Pope, his wife's 33-minute visit with the Pope. Massive ritual, the JFK assassination. And again, he was killed in the middle of Dealey Plaza, named after a Scottish Rite Freemason, and George Dealey was in the paper business, and JFK had given his speech years earlier about secret societies to the National Press Club. So then he gets killed in the middle of a press, a location named after a member of the press who's part of a secret society. So the whole thing is really interesting, but a massive 187 ritual, and that's with the Jesuits.
Oh, but fascinating stuff, Zach. And I'm gonna have to get a copy of your book because I'm sure there's many other angles to the JFK death. That was the super synced up with numerology. Because it was a Jesuit and through.
Indeed.
And that's what the director of the CIA at the time, John McCone, was a Papal Knight of Malta, a Papal Knight of St. Gregory the Great, and a Papal Knight of St. Sylvester. The head of the Defense Intelligence Agency at the time was going to become a Roman Catholic priest, that being Joseph Francis Carroll, the first director of the DIA. He got his doctorate from the Jesuits at Loyola Chicago. Like I said, Hoover received the Sword of Loyola. You can see the photo of that on the internet. I have a picture of it on my website. Actually, I'm going to see what date exactly Hoover received his Sword of Loyola, because that might be synced up with some interesting numerology. But you can see this, people, I found this, I just typed in Hoover Sword of Loyola right on Google search, and you can see it right from the Jesuit Loyola Chicago website. Let me see if I can get the exact day. 1964. Actually, they blocked off. Wow, on the website they blocked off the exact date.
Look into that too. It's all ritual. I can guarantee it without even looking at it. But yeah, it's usually the ritual has a lot to do with the date and a lot to do with measuring from the person's birthday to the date the event happens. That's pretty much how they operate.
Okay, so I have to look into these dates more too. It's a very it's an important angle to the full picture. Mm-hmm. No doubt. Before we went to the commercial break, I was reading the quote from Archbishop James Edward Quigley saying how when the United States of America rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. Right. And what this basically is, though, is that people should look at what this phrase is. The phrase is called the doctrine of the Pope's temporal power, and this goes all the way back to a document from 1302. Ultimately, it goes back to the forgery of the donation of Constantine back in the 7th century, where the popes forged the document from the Emperor Constantine. That they said for over 350 years, and in this preserved document, Constantine laid out that the Pope should have absolute sovereignty over all temporal authorities of the world. A kind of a laughable forgery that the Catholic encyclopedias even admit is a forgery, but everyone seems to still take these claims serious because every single world leader today bows down to the Pope kind of slavishly. and they all kiss his ring. But in a document that everyone should read, it's still on the internet. This was a papal bull from 1302. I don't know if you've heard of this document, Zach. It's called Unum Sanctum. This was Pope Boniface VIII, but he famously ended off this. This just epitomizes the Pope's temporal power. He says, "We therefore declare, say, and affirm that submission on the part of every man to the Bishop of Rome is altogether necessary for his salvation." In other words, they think everyone must become the slave of the Roman pontiff for salvation's sake. And this doctrine, is put into practice today. Like, actually, George Bush, I believe this was April 11th, 2008. So he has 411. George Bush gave an interview with a Catholic journalist, Raymond Arroyo, of the channel EWTN. And he actually said that he saw God in the eyes of Pope Benedict XVI.
Huh.
Very, very, very creepy. But the popes of Rome say that they're God. Like, that's actually that's the official Catholic doctrine. And this doctrine of the temporal power was actually admitted by National Security Agency, proving that they're acting as the Inquisition and the confessional did.
Eric, we went into commercial. My fault. Sit tight. We'll be right back after the break, everybody.
Google, the information propaganda. This is why TFR is 100% uncensored, unregulated, and listener-supported. The shows on TFR are not micromanaged by the station, and our hosts are free to speak their minds however they please. As such, the views and opinions expressed on our station are of those who make them. If you happen to hear anything offensive on TFR, please send us an email to toughtitty@tfrlive.com, and we'll be happy to tell you that we really don't give a damn. We stand for freedom of speech and non-censorship. If you also stand for free speech, you can go to tfrlive.com/sign-up and sign up for a TFR supporter pass and help us in our mission to keep the airwaves uncensored and unregulated. TFR, your uncensored and unregulated protection from deception.
A second day of protests. I'm Lisa Lacera, Fox News. A heavy police presence on the streets of Minneapolis after the death of a black man while in police custody this week. A white officer, along with 3 others, has since been fired and seen on video pushing his knee into George Floyd's neck while he screams he can't breathe and then goes limp. Police Chief Medaria Arredondo says he understands the need to protest, but is urging protesters to not become violent toward others.
I direct our officers to practice restraint. That meant, quite frankly, that a building, a city facility, was significantly damaged. But I'd rather have that than our officers being involved in an encounter where either they get hurt physically or one person from our community gets.
A full investigation. There is also a protest in solidarity in Los Angeles. The U.S. has had more deaths from COVID-19 than in the Korean and Vietnam wars combined. That's according to Johns Hopkins University, which says 100,000 people have died as California takes more steps to open up.
In California, hair salons and barbershops can reopen, but not nail salons. This reopening applies to counties that meet the criteria on virus control. So that is most of the state, but not the most populated counties like LA and San Francisco.
Obviously, we're fearful as people begin to mix, people start to congregate together that haven't congregated together, that you have few cases, flare-ups, and transmission.
Especially, Governor Gavin Newsom says, in places that maybe can't handle a surge in their hospitals as well as others can. Earlier in the week, the state said church openings and in-store shopping can happen again. And
Fox's Jessica Rosenthal reporting Peter Manfredonia, the suspect in a multi-state manhunt after police say he committed murder and kidnapping, is in custody in Maryland. That's according to Connecticut State Police. America's listening to Fox News.
You must unite as citizens.
We are TFR, Truth Frequency Radio.
This is not conditional range. Conditional range. Sitter in effect. Please enter your agent number now, followed by the hash key.
You have to create culture. Don't watch TV. Don't read magazines. Don't even listen to NPR.
Time comes when silence is betrayal. More for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them.
Think for yourself. Question authority.
This code has been compromised.
All right, we're back, Truth Seeker. It's the final hour. Sorry that snuck up on us last time because the music didn't play and I missed it. But we're here with our guest, Eric. He's got tons of knowledge and information on the Jesuits. And we're really getting after it here tonight because no doubt about it, the tip of the spear's been showing. The Jesuits are leading this worldwide agenda of coronavirus, which is a Trojan horse for us giving up, our remaining liberties so that we can be under the everlasting watchful eye of Big Brother pretty much across the world. And the Jesuits, for years, they've been warned about an organization within the Catholic Church bent on world domination. And it is happening right now at this time. So we're trying to get the word out on who these people are, what they've been up to. And as far as I can tell, this man, Eric, he's got about as much information on the Jesuits as anybody out there. And what amazes me is how a man with this good of information, who's been putting it out for all these years, can have so few subscribers on YouTube. There's all these huge truth channels, people that, can hardly speak a sentence, people that just pander trash every day, just stick with mainstream narratives, stick with politics. And I guess it's because they're appealing to the mainstream, but you get a man like this with all this knowledge and information and somehow people are sleeping on his channel. So if you guys are out there right now, please go subscribe to Eric. Help his work get more views because that's the way it works. The more views a channel gets, the more likely it is to show up in somebody else's feed and for somebody else to find it. So check out this man's channel, subscribe, watch his videos, hit the like button, leave a comment. More people have to know what he's talking about. So with that said, Eric, you're back on.
Oh, thank you, Zach. I really appreciate that. That's very nice of you. And I know, this is what the power that the Jesuits and the Vatican yield, telling that the majority of the personalities in so-called alternative media remain almost completely silent on the Vatican question.
Right.
And to me, that's evidence that there's been a big infiltration into the quote unquote truther movement by Vatican and Jesuit agents.
Indeed.
And I know, when you're putting, and you do a lot of good work too, when you're putting out the guys I stream with, researchers Johnny Cerrucci and N Goods. We've had one of our last 8 podcast streams taken down from YouTube.
And
so they're really trying to censor information. I know you've gone through a bunch of YouTube channels in the past, and you've had quite a bit of experience dealing with censorship as well. So they're really trying to shut us up, it seems.
Indeed. All right, friend, you got the floor again.
I guess we'll start off right before we went to the commercial break. I was mentioning the temporal power of the Pope, which is a very imperative doctrine to understand, to get what's going on in today's geopolitical landscape. But I wanted to highlight how this doctrine of the temporal power of the Pope is admitted by the National Security Agency in the United States, thereby proving directly that the National Security Agency is acting as the Inquisition confessional did in the Middle Ages by spying on all citizens and heretics without consent. And I've documented this in a blog post I wrote titled On My Jesuit World Order blog on Reddit, titled The National Security Agency, NSA, admits that the silver key in its logo represents the Pope's temporal power. And this was archived, thankfully, the archive.org webpage. You can save websites before they're taken down. But this was from the 2004 National Security Agency. And in this logo, I quote official Vatican sources, which the Vatican's, I'm sure people have seen the Vatican flag. There's a gold key crossing with a silver key. The gold key symbolizes the spiritual power that the Pope yields. They say that the Pope is God himself. And in this post, I cite a papal bull written in 1890 by Pope Leo XIII called Septime Christianae, where he says that the Pope must be shown obedience like God himself.
Interesting.
Which is completely ridiculous. But that's the spiritual key. That's his gold key. But the silver key is his political or his temporal power key. That's his power to rule all princes and kings and dominions of the earth. And so, right on the National Security Agency website, and I have in this post, they say here that the Dexter and Senate. So when people pull up a picture on their computers of the NSA key, you'll see that it's like an eagle, which, an eagle, there's all sorts of Roman symbolism with the eagle, the Gregorian eagle, but it's an eagle gripping like a silver key in his talons. And that silver key is the Pope's key. It's actually an identical engraving on the key. There's like on the butt end of the key, just like how the Pope's official key has it. But the NSA says here that the dexter and sinister talons of the bird clutch a silver key. The key in the eagle's talons, representing the key to security, evolved from the emblem of St. Peter the Apostle in his power to loose and to bind. It also symbolizes the mission to protect and gain access to secrets. That's right from the NSA website. People aren't aware. The popes of Rome and the Vatican claims that St. Peter the Apostle was the first pope. And they say in the Catholic Catechism that the Apostle Peter passed down his power of loosening and binding to the popes. So, the NSA is saying this right here that they're serving the Pope. Back in the Inquisition days, everyone was subject to get their house raided to make sure they weren't reading books from heretical authors or, access to information that guys like me and you are putting out there. Everyone was subject to that back in the ancient days. There's total information control and censorship. The Catholic priests, for thousands of years, were the only part of the populace that was allowed to have access to literature. They want to keep the masses dumb, deaf, and blind, metaphorically. But it's amazing that they admit it right here on the National Security Agency website. I look into it. The director of the NSA during 9/11, Michael Hayden, was a devout Roman Catholic. For instance, they completely, and it's every single agency that's like this in the United States. To me, that's kind of an unprecedented power that they're willing to, put this out in the open, and, no one in the alternative media is talking about it. Also, the fact that there are two busts of inquisitorial popes in the U.S. House of Representatives. Popes Innocent III, who initiated the Inquisition. People can just look up photos of the Roman Inquisition if they haven't seen it. Like, that's where waterboarding comes from. And all sorts of, they basically, perfected torture. The most brutal means of torture you can conceive of were perfected by the Roman Catholic priests in the Inquisition. And so Innocent III, he famously issued the decree to burn alive heretical authors. So people, so people get some context, guys like me and you, Zach, if we were back in, living in the 1300s and we published research like we're doing now, we would doubtlessly, be heretical authors, quote unquote. And, we would be issued or ordered to be sent to the stake. This is like the dark ages that the Vatican believes.
We're going back to that. We're going to go back there. That's where we're going to end up back at. So, I mean, that's what people need to recognize. We're going back to that same type of time frame. That's where they have us headed right now.
Well, absolutely. People look at it, this is what like Nazi Germany was. Nazi Germany was just like another modern day Inquisition. And you look at who backed the Nazis. All the highest ranking Nazi members were Roman Catholics, starting with Hitler himself. Born into Catholic parents in Roman Catholic Austria. But I have an interesting quote here from Walter Schellenberg. People have heard of his name. He was the head of the Nazis' foreign intelligence throughout the Second World War. In 1956, he wrote a book called The Labyrinth. But he says here on page 31 a very interesting thing. And this is very interesting considering, and I have some videos on my channel. I know you've done great work on this too, Zach, highlighting how close Anthony Fauci is to the Jesuits and how much he praises the Jesuit order, and how much Anthony Fauci says his Jesuit training really helps him like engage in his day-to-day activities, being the head of the NIAID. But Heinrich Himmler as well, the mass murderer of Nazi Germany, also admired the Jesuits just like Anthony Fauci did. And this is admitted by Walter Schellenberg here in his book, The Labyrinth. On page 31, he says, the SS organization had been built up by Himmler on the principles of the Order of the Jesuits. The service statutes and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius Loyola formed a pattern which Himmler assiduously tried to copy. Absolute obedience was the supreme rule. Each and every order had to be accepted without question. The Reichsführer SS, Himmler's title as the supreme head of the SS, was intended to be the counterpart of the Jesuits' general of the order, and the whole structure of the leadership was adopted from these studies of the hierarchic order of the Catholic Church. A medieval castle near Paderborn in Westphalia was reconstructed and adapted to serve as a kind of SS monastery, the so-called Wabelsburg, hereafter of the order assembled once a year. There is right now, the SS, doubtlessly one of the bloodiest, most, ruthless organizations. You can say in the history of humanity, but doubtlessly in the 20th century, and openly, according to Walter Schellenberg, they were modeled off of the Jesuits. And I'm sure your viewers, don't need a history of what happened in Nazi Germany. That is the direction that we're heading.
Well, since you bring it up, I should mention that the name Adolf Hitler in Gematria does sum to 56 and 187, just like Society of Jesus, and a lot of historians contend that he didn't really die, he didn't really commit suicide, they never found his body, but instead he was taken to South America where he was protected by the Catholic Church. So the numbers within his name...
Actually think about that, and that's a great point. All of these countries that all the Nazis fled to are devout Roman Catholic countries, like Argentina and Paraguay and Brazil.
Right. And again, they are the ones who've largely conquered the world, and they pretty much control Britain. The phrase with Britain is the sun never sets on Britain. And you think of the sun never sets on Britain, and what's the Jesuit logo? So it's all there, and it is kind of a complicated web when you start to look at some things, because they play both sides of so many different events, especially the wars, divide and conquer. But
absolutely. I think about World War II, like Hitler was essentially like a lay Jesuit here. Schellenberg admits on the same book, page 108. That another man who exercised great influence over him, Hitler, was the Austrian engineer Plassinger. It was from him, Plassinger, that Hitler took the idea of modeling the structure and leadership of the Nazi Party on the organization of the Order of the Jesuits.
Yeah.
So you have Hitler controlled, and Joseph Stalin playing the other side of the Hegelian dialectic. Stalin was openly educated by Jesuits as well at the Tiflis Seminary in Georgia. And Stalin actually admitted in an interview with the German author Emil Ludwig that the Jesuits terrorized him at the seminary. And it was after, this is a quote exactly from Joseph Stalin, who was one of the bloodiest butchers of all time. He said, in protest against the outrageous regime and the Jesuitical methods prevalent at the seminary, I was ready to become, and actually did become, a revolutionary, a believer in Marxism as a believer in Marxism as a really revolutionary teaching, end quote. Karl Marx was occultly educated by Jesuits as well for 5 years at a Jesuit high school in Trier, Germany, which is one of the most Catholic parts of Germany. It's in the south near Bavaria. And that's an enigma to me too, because, Marx was openly Jewish, but he was also, very anti-Semitic. And I think an event to study in history is the Dreyfus Affair. I think that shows historically that there is a Jesuitical agenda to try to blame Jewish people for controlling or they want to blame Jews as being the puppet masters. It's its ultimate way to deflect from themselves. And the Jesuits wrote the famous Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I'm sure everyone's heard of that document here.
Sure.
That's why in the document, the supposed Zionist plotters even say that the only group that compares to us is the Jesuits.
That's interesting.
They hint at, in the book.
I have a question for you. I think I was just scrolling through your subreddit, and you have I'm not sure it's your post or if one of the other researchers with you in there, but something I've been looking into myself is the Fabian Society, since they were established in 1884, and of course George Orwell was a member of the Fabian Society, and he wrote 1984 in light of how important the number 84 is to the Jesuits. Do you know anything about the Fabian Society and the Jesuits?
Well, actually, I put that post up 9 days ago. I did a post. George Bernard Shaw. I titled it "George Bernard Shaw wished for the Fabian Society to be the Jesuits of socialism." And that came from the book from Edward Bernstein. I think he was also a fellow socialist. This book was called "My Years of Exile: Reminiscences of a Socialist." Probably pronounced that wrong. 1921, page 255, 256. I know the Fabian Society. They're named after a Roman emperor.
Right.
Fabius Maximus.
Right. And I always think of George Orwell's 1984 because, again, Jesuits 84, Masonry's 84, Zionism's 84, United States of America 84. And, it seems that a lot of people look at that book and say, wow, what great foresight and what a warning. But to me, it almost seems like it's so accurate that it's not really that he had foresight, but it almost seems like he had the insider information on what the game plan was that was going to be rolled out that essentially we're now living out. And if the Fabian Society is controlled by the Jesuits and they're the tip of the spear, that would make a lot of sense to me. So I've been trying to find some evidence that is the case.
Well, yeah, I would say I'll look into more detailed background as well, but I think this is a pretty solid link here to the Jesuits and the Fabians, with George Bernard Shaw saying that they wanted to be the Jesuits of socialism.
Sure. Yeah, that is a good link.
Very, very intriguing. The Jesuits, they historically created this communistic and socialist system of government in Paraguay in the 1600s.
Yeah.
They were called reduction.
Wasn't that the 33 Orientals? Isn't that what they were called?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the 33. That would be an interesting.
This is something I covered back in 2013 or 14. It's been so long, but I'm pretty sure that group was called the 33 Orientals. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. That was their name. Their missions were called Missions Orientales, or reductions. I guess that was another. They had 33 of them. Man. The 30.
It was in these reductions. There's been many books that have gone into this history. The Jesuits actually, in the New Advent Catholic, or I guess it's the Catholic Encyclopedia now under the title the New Advent Encyclopedia. They admit on the article in the word of quote communism, and they even say that the Jesuits would support later socialists and communists in the article. Like Fidel Castro, for instance, who was educated by 3 Jesuit schools. And Raul Castro, who actually said in 2015 that the current pope is a Jesuit, and in a way, so am I.
The most brutal
from Raul Castro.
The most brutal Jesuit rituals I've seen in the time I've been doing this are the death of Fidel Castro and his son. They're both perfectly synced with Pope Francis's visit with them. I have to go back and look at it, but it's just amazing what they did. And yeah, of course, Castro was a Jesuit, so yeah.
Well, it's that's in terms of Hegelian dialectic. I think that's one of the biggest Hegelian dialectics ever. The Jesuits both created modern communism and fascism. Simultaneously.
Yeah.
And you can say even democracy is ultimately, democracy, as you can say, has historically been a farce, ever since because the Roman Republic was, supposedly a quote democracy, and the state and the Roman Republic had the absolute power of life and death over their citizens, which doesn't sound like a democracy to me. Now we're seeing this all over the world with the states of emergency being declared everywhere. If you look back historically, where does that root back to? It goes back to ancient Rome. They would declare a Senate consultum altinum, or a Senate Consultum Altinum, it's hard to pronounce it in Latin, and then they would also issue tumultuses for internal emergencies. But in terms of like just suspending the Constitution and a democratic form of government to go to temporary emergency war powers, martial law, that goes, historically back to the Roman Republic as well. And, we're seeing that all over the world today. That's probably unprecedented. I'm pretty sure is there a country in the world that isn't in a state of emergency right now over this COVID pandemic? It's
right.
Fast.
Right. Just by the way, to chime in on the death of Fidel Castro, I had to go back and look at it. He met with the Pope on November 25th, 2016, Pope Francis, and he died February 1st, 2018, 2-1. The word Jesuit equals 21 the small way, 84 the big way. So he dies on 2-1, 433 days after meeting Pope Francis. 433 is the 84th prime number. And then I want to say his son died 433 days later. So it's just, again, the Jesuits, they don't mess around with this code. And when you know it, you just see through what's really going on. Even the death of Fidel Castro and his son, who were both Jesuits themselves. So it goes to show they kill their own by the numbers. It's just like Ignatius of Loyola dying 84 days from his birthday. And I'm not exactly sure why that is the case. I don't know if they believe in reincarnation or what, but something's going on there.
Well, they definitely do kill their own. An interesting case of that was, I'm sure your viewers have heard of Tim Russert.
Oh, of course, Tim Russert. Yeah.
NBC. He actually, I know he went to 2 Jesuit schools, and I think he had was John Carroll in Cleveland, which I mentioned John Carroll when I came on earlier. They named that after the founder of Georgetown. But Russert went to John Carroll University. I think he went to Scranton University as well. You can see that on his Wikipedia page that he was affiliated with 2 or 3 Jesuit schools. He was one of theirs. And Russert admitted to going to Bohemian Grove. I know. In Bohemian Grove, the keepers of the Bohemian Grove are a Roman Catholic secret society called the Knights of Saint Hubertus, which is a very interesting fact. But Tim Russert famously questioned John Kerry, who has a doctorate from Jesuit Boston College, and George Bush on their affiliations with Skull and Bones, a secret society based out of Yale University. Interestingly, Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, is where the Knights of Columbus were founded.
Connecticut equals 46 like Catholic. And Skull and Bones gets their symbolism from the Knights Templar, another order of the Catholic Church. And if you look at the Knights Templar, supposedly the date that they ended officially in history, which they didn't really end, but it's March 22nd, if I'm not mistaken, 322, just like Skull and Bones, 322. And then they say that Skull and Bones is the offshoot of the Bavarian Illuminati. And if you look up the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, he died on November 18th, which is the 322nd day of the year. So,
well, fascinating. Wow. Interesting connection with Weishaupt in 322. And if people aren't aware, he was actually like a Jesuit. Like he was a professor in Roman Catholic canon law.
Right.
Which is the doctrine of how the church rules politically. And he openly, even the encyclopedias say that he was brought up his entire childhood with the Jesuit order.
Yep.
Just very fascinating. There's many interesting Roman Catholic connections. Reportedly, one of the idols of Skull and Bones is a Catholic mystical figure, Don Quixote.
Right.
But there's many, William Buckley was a Knight of Malta, educated by the Jesuits, the founder of the National Review and a high-ranking CIA intelligence officer. He was a famous bonesman. Numerous connections that show that the Catholic Church is controlling Skull and Bones and Yale University in general. If people want to look into just an interesting fact on how the Catholic Church kind of operates as a fifth column on non-Catholic schools, is people should look up what the Newman Centers are all over the world. So what it is every single non-Catholic university has a special Catholic center on campus called the Newman Center, where they indoctrinate the students in Roman Catholic philosophy and ideology and Roman Catholic views on history. But it did no exception. Actually, Yale University is one of the first universities in America to have a Newman Center. I think University of Pennsylvania was the first. Yale University uses the Roman laurel wreath right in their official seal, kind of just like Harvard does. I know Harvard actually has like ordained Catholic priests like working on campus. Harvard, of course, has the Newman Center. Harvard invited the shamed pedophile Cardinal George Pell of Australia to come give like moral leadership advice.
Hey, sit tight. The commercial snuck up again. We'll be right back, everybody.
A 7-herb combination made from garlic, cayenne, hawthorn, bilberry, ginkgo biloba, valerian, and milk thistle. Extendivite feeds our body with the right nutrients to keep us healthy. Just listen to what Arthur has to say.
I was just calling to tell you what a great product you have. I had used this about 10 years ago after I had congestive heart failure. And it fixed me up and got me going for the last 10 years. Lately, I've been having heart trouble again, so I placed another order because this was the only thing that ever worked. And I just wanted to let you know that you have a great product.
To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Hey folks, guess what the #1 by email? You ready? We love this tea. We love this tea. Time after time, week after week, we love this tea. Life Change Tea gives you more energy, a beautiful cleansing, and fulfills its slogan perfectly. The tea that makes you go. So if you want to be on your health game, log on to getthetea.com and order Life Change Super Strength Tea. Packages come in a 1-month supply, and when you brew this stuff, wait until you see the results. Aren't we all about the results? And with a lot of people's health struggling, we can use a little bit of help. Doctors will tell you disease starts in the gut. So log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Be our next email saying, I love this tea. I love this tea. Get the tea at getthetea.com. Helping America one tea bag at a time.
Greetings, Earth Explorers. My name is Brooks Agnew, and I am your host on X Squared Radio every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. This is where the past meets the future. We explore the mysteries of the universe and of the Earth. We might go a little past your imagination. You will be safely traveling with us. We will dissolve the propaganda of dangerous people with dangerous plans for the planet. We will discuss the latest technologies and challenges for humankind. We will discover the safest place for you to stand when the thinkings and doings of mankind come flying apart, and how you can be one of the people that helps put it back together. Join us.
Real people, real radio. Wherever you are, make it TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
All right, we're back, Truth Seeker. It's the final 30 minutes of the show. We still got our special guest with us, Eric777. For all the people waiting on hold, because you're used to getting on the show on Wednesday nights, I do apologize. Great guest. He's got a lot of great information. After the show's over, I'll hang around on the live stream and open up the Gematria hotline if you really got something pressing you want to call in tonight with. But we're going to let Eric wrap it up here with this final segment. So, Eric, just one more number I want to throw at you with the Jesuits, just so you can be aware of these numbers as you do your research. If you look at the date that Anthony Fauci became the head of the NIH, it was November 2nd, 1984, 11/2, like 112. The Jesuits operate in 112 countries, and in Gematria, Catholicism equals 112. I don't know if you have Netflix, but they came out with that movie some months back, The Two Popes. You'll see in the early part of that movie, a taxi cab goes by and the 112's on the side of the taxi cab. They really like that number 112. There's also a prophecy about the 266th Pope from St. Malachi, and his prophecy was 112 popes from now will be the final Pope, which happens to be Pope Francis. So just wanted to throw that out there for your numbers education tonight, since you're giving us a lot of good information. And again, friend, you got the floor.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, wow. Mind-blowing stuff. You know, Pope Francis being the first openly ordained Jesuit priest to be Pope. I think if there is a last Pope, and Malachi's prophecy is true, he is the perfect guy to be in there.
Right.
And with this coronavirus pandemic, I saw you commented on this video, but your viewers should check out. I put a mirrored video on my channel last week of the Superior General of the Jesuits talking. This was February 2nd, 2020, but he says that we need to make permanent changes as a result of the coronavirus. We all need to sacrifice our individualism and come together for the greater good. And probably the most interesting soundbite from that clip was the Superior General of the Jesuit Order, Arturo Sosa. He said, "Remember that this is not an accident." He said it's not an accident,
Yeah.
The COVID-19.
Yeah, he knows best. He knows best, just like Fauci. Yeah, I mean, it's just sick what they get away with. And if I remember right, the current Superior General, the outbreak started 70 days after his birthday. And again, coronavirus is 70. And there's probably something about all the events that happened in that year. But yeah, I'll have to look up that quote. Good one.
Yeah, it's fascinating how it is in the open they are with this now. And another interesting definition, I had this up here. I wanted to mention this earlier, but there's in Catholic ecclesiastical Latin, Corona is defined as like Mary worship.
Huh.
Of course, Mary is like the patron saint or like the church. I know many countries in like England, the supposed Protestant country, England was recently consecrated to the Virgin Mary over coronavirus concerns. And, if you know the history of England, the day that they lost their sovereignty, I'll have to look at the exact date because there's probably again numerological significance, but it was the Treaty of 1213 when King John was king in England. Innocent III was Pope. That England lost its sovereignty to the Papal States, and England was forced to pay like a Peter's pence tax, like a papal clerical tax every year, going back to the Pope. But this comes from the dictionary, Concise Catholic Dictionary, published by Robert C. Broderick, published in 1944. But Corona is defined as of the Rosary, which is very interesting.
Huh.
And Corona also, is like with the sun Corona.
Right.
The Jesuit Order logo is. People should look up. Have you seen the logo of the Smithsonian Museum before, Zach?
I haven't.
That's a good one. People should check that out because you'll see that the Jesuit sunburst pattern is pretty much the logo. Like they're not hiding it whatsoever.
Sure it is. And by the way, with regards to their sunburst pattern, there are 32 sun rays on the Jesuit logo, just like how they share the 32nd or they share the motto with the 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite. And in Gematria, all of these things equal 32. Christ equals 32, which fits in with the sun thing. America's 32, and Scottish is 32. And 7/4/1776 has 32 date numerology. So, yeah, there's a lot in their symbolism with their logo. But, yeah, I didn't realize that about the Smithsonian. Very interesting.
Well, it's fascinating. Actually, another really interesting one I found is on Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island in the Virgin Islands. He had a sundial there.
Huh.
And the Jesuit sunburst pattern in the sundial, there's not quite 32 rays of the sun, but the Jesuit sunburst pattern, how it alternates with like a straight line and then a wavy line.
Uh-huh.
The center of the sun. Epstein had that kind of pattern on his sundial, which is very interesting, considering as well this guy was documented to, been donating to the Roman Catholic charities down in the Virgin Islands. And if people look at his black book list of contacts, you'll see all sorts of papal nobility that were a bit close and well connected with Jeffrey Epstein, like Rupert Murdoch, who's a Knight of St. Gregory the Great and a Knight of Malta, the News Corp, who actually said that News Corp and the Jesuits are, actually I think he said the exact quote from Rupert Murdoch was, News Corp is just like the Jesuits.
Huh.
Yeah, he said that in 2008, speaking at Georgetown University. But he says the Jesuits and News Corp attract highly talented people from all over the world. The Jesuits and News Corp like to challenge the status quo, and both the Jesuits and News Corp have a reputation of independence and innovation. And he goes on like a bit after there, but there you go. There's Rupert Murdoch literally saying that the Jesuits and News Corp are one and the same. He was on Epstein's blacklist.
Huh.
Just, the tip of the iceberg in terms of the Vatican papal connections. Like there's a really interesting Catholic aristocrat, Rosa Monckton. Her brother, Lord Christopher Monckton, was a Knight of Malta, was one of Margaret Thatcher's chief political advisors. But Rosa Monckton openly is good friends with Jeffrey Epstein. She's devout Roman Catholic, has about, I think, 10 children's charities, which makes it, even more... sinister, I think, and cringeworthy. And she's in Epstein's, book, like 20 entries on the book. They're documented being great friends. Rosa Monckton said Epstein's like an onion. You peel one layer off of him, you find a new layer of personality underneath. Like the Habsburgs were visiting Jeffrey Epstein. I'm sure people have heard of the Habsburg family, an ancient Roman Catholic, powerful nobility family. At one point, there was a Habsburg on the throne of like every country in Europe.
Huh.
At some point throughout history. But definitely, that Jesuit sunburst pattern is very, it's you see it, quite a bit of. It's even kind of there's a Jesuitical sunburst even on the logo of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, which I call Catholics in Action. It was even admitted by the Catholic Register that the CIA is Catholics in Action.
Huh.
Let me get the title of the article. It's called "Why Catholics Thrive in the CIA," and it was done by the Catholic Herald, May 6, 2016, and they actually give the CIA the Catholics in Action nickname here.
Huh.
But the founding father of the CIA was a devout Roman Catholic, William Donovan, the head of the Office of Strategic Services, which was the World War II precursor to the CIA. But he was as Roman Catholic as one could be in terms of wanting to serve the political temporal power of the Pope. William Donovan was knighted personally by Pope Pius XII in 1944 with the Knight of St. Sylvester. And on his statue in Langley, Donovan is cited as the founding father of the CIA. And the majority of CIA directors and deputy directors have, and even in this article here, Why Catholics Thrive in the CIA, it says, quote, "Some of the most influential directors in CIA history have been Catholic. Men such as Walter Bedell Smith, John McCone, William Colby, and William Casey. They were not just casual Catholics, they were devout mass goers, in many cases, members of groups like the Knights of Malta."
Very interesting. We got about almost 20 minutes of show left. Actually, I guess it's more like 16, 17 minutes. Something I'm curious if you've done any research on is the establishment of Israel and the Catholic Church being behind it. And my thoughts on that is the Balfour Declaration was written November 2nd, 1917, addressed to the Rothschild. And November 2nd is a very interesting date, 112. Again, like we mentioned a moment ago, the Jesuits operate in 112 countries. Catholicism equals 112. What also equals 112 is Judaism and Zionist. And the language of Zionism is declared establishing a Zionist state using, the British partition of Israel or whatever they referred to it before. But then not only that, but then when Israel was finally established on May 14th, 1948, with David Ben-Gurion declaring it, May 14th is written 14/5 in the majority of the world, and Catholic equals 145 when you run the alphabetic order in reverse. The name David Ben-Gurion's 145 with just the alphabetic order. So I see the Catholic fingerprints there with the establishment of Israel in terms of the way they operate by the numbers. And just wondering if you had any...
Well, very interesting. Actually, interesting with Arthur Balfour is in the book, The Letters of Arthur Balfour and Lady Elcho, wrote the Balfour Declaration. This Lady Elcho on one page says that, she says Balfour just... one day, like he was sitting up and perked, and he had like the splendid smile of a Jesuit priest. That was the language that this Lady Elcho used in this book, The Letters of Arthur Balfour.
Wow,
and, Lady Elcho,
that's just what I mean.
Which is very interesting. And going back to even before Israel was founded as a state, Theodor Herzl, I guess you could say, is one of the modern founders of the Zionist movement, really. Theodor Herzl had a private audience with Pope Pius X, I think in 1904. And many leaders of the Zionist movement sought the Pope's political approval and guidance in terms of before the State of Israel was created. Leaders like Nahum Sokolov and Chaz Wiseman. And interesting, going back to I did a post on the Rome Rules subreddit a long time ago on this, but the man who founded the Bilderberg Group, his name was Joseph Redinger. SJ. I think he was a Jesuit. He was openly educated by Jesuits, a devout Roman Catholic. He admits to meeting the Jesuit Superior General at the time, Vladimir Lidichowski, in Zurich, Switzerland, in his memoirs. But Joseph Rettinger, right on the Bilderberg website, they say that one of this Jesuit, Joseph Rettinger's goals was the creation of the State of Israel. Right from the Wikipedia website. Between 1906 and 1920, Jesuit Joseph Rettinger, worked on projects as diverse as the definition of a reorganization plan for Central and Eastern Europe wanted by the General of the Jesuits, the Polish Count Lidichowski, the creation of a world government with the British Federalist Arthur Capel, the creation of the State of Israel in collaboration with some of the leaders of the Zionist movement, such as Chaim Weizmann, who I believe became the first Prime Minister of Israel, and Nahum Sokolov. And if people look at Nahum Sokolov's Wikipedia page, you'll see that he had two audiences with the Pope. Weizmann also had a papal audience. Rettinger was one of those who best understood the contribution of the United States in the post-war world, contributing more than any other to the establishment of the transatlantic Bilderberg Group. But to me, I think Israel is the Pope's Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem.
It makes a lot of sense. And with regards to your Bilderberg Conference point, the first Bilderberg Conference was in the year 54, like Jesuit Orders 54, like John Carroll's 54, who established Georgetown at age 54. That was my first ever observation about the Bilderberg Conference and wondering how much influence the Jesuits had. Just for the record, with regards to Theodor Herzl, who you also brought up, he died at age 44 years before the establishment of Zionist Israel. And Zion equals 44, so does Israel, so does Netanyahu. Netanyahu equals 44 in Hebrew and in English. And he died on July 3rd. The name Theodor Herzl equals 73, like sacrifice, and he is considered the founder of modern Zionism. So it seems that he was truly sacrificed by the numbers with the planned establishment of Israel on the date that they did. And by the way, with regards to Israel's date of establishment, May 14th, 1948, Mark Zuckerberg, the face of Facebook, which launched the same day that DARPA, the military intelligence, concluded their project that was Facebook called LifeLog. The date that Facebook launched was exactly 266 days after Mark Zuckerberg's birthday, the big Jesuit number, like Pope Francis is the 266th Pope. And Mark Zuckerberg is born on Israel's birthday, May 14th, in the year 84. And Mark Zuckerberg equals 84, like Jesuit as well. What do you know about the Jesuit and Jewish connections in light of someone like Mark Zuckerberg being Jewish?
Well, I know Zuckerberg, I classify him as like a papal court Jew. And, if you look on Wikipedia page, court Jews were Jews of prominent wealth and establishment who were granted political and financial privileges from they're primarily Roman Catholic kings in Europe at the time. But for example, a guy like Chuck Schumer, for instance, openly Jewish, the head of the a particular Senate committee, I tend to use that. But Chuck Schumer is a powerful Jewish Democrat. When Pope Francis came to America, September 23rd, 2015 is when he gave the speech to the joint session of Congress, Jesuit Pope Francis. Chuck Schumer said that I have the video on my channel, but he's just saying like how much he loves the Pope. He's like, I'm so excited for the Pope, the Holy Father to be here. Basically, the papal court Jew class, they're all subservient and working for the Pope. Many of the Jewish, like for instance, like Janet Yellen, the current head of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, got his doctorate from the Jesuits at Georgetown. But recently, before he was in charge of the Pope's Federal Reserve Bank, he had an open Jew, Janet Yellen, as the director of the Federal Reserve. But her husband, Daniel Aklarov, is professor at Jesuit Georgetown University. So they kind of what for me, like when I see someone that's openly Jewish in power, if you look into their background, you'll see direct connections to Rome almost every single time in the background. For instance, like Jerry Nadler, the head of the Judiciary Committee.
Right.
He's Jewish. He went to Jesuit Fordham University.
My channel's been deleted 19 times. The last time it was deleted was for talking about Jerry Nadler. So I'm weary of talking about Jerry Nadler. But yeah, he does so many rituals by the numbers. So.
Well, I'm seeing, Nadler, like I believe he might even have his doctorate from the Jesuits at Fordham. I think at least his master's.
Yeah.
But and with the Vatican and Israel, like people should look up the accords that were signed in 1993 and 1997. Like the Vatican or the Roman Catholic Church, because the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church are one and the same. But it's just a legal fiction. When you refer to the Vatican, you're referring to the sovereign nation state that has like 180 papal nuncios stationed to all of the various capitals of the world, acting as political agents, versus the Roman Catholic Church, which is the religion that they practice. In reality, it's one and the same. It's kind of an incredible legal fiction. But with Israel, though, the Vatican or the Holy See got into political agreements in 93 and 97 that gave them full tax-exempt status, and they're one of the biggest landholders in Israel to this day. Like in Jerusalem, the biggest hotel in Jerusalem is openly owned by the Vatican Roman Catholic Church. It's called the Notre Dame Center.
Sure.
In Jerusalem.
Sure.
And Netanyahu goes to bow down to the Pope, just like everyone else.
Yeah, did you catch the ritual last year when Notre Dame burned in France? How on the exact same day, Al-Aqsa Mosque burned on Temple Mount? And, of course, both structures have connections to the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar used to refer to Al-Aqsa Mosque as Solomon's Temple when they controlled it during the time of the Crusades. And the day that they both burned was 118 days before August 11th. August 11th can be expressed 11/8, and that was the day of Tisha B'Av to remember the destruction of the two temples. And what happened at Temple Mount on August 11th is the Muslim worshippers had the Israeli police fire tear gas on them at Temple Mount, and tear gas happens to equal 118 in Gematria. But did you catch that last year, how those two sites burned on the same day, April 15th?
And, I didn't catch the same day. No, that's no. I think you're right though, thinking that there's a Templar connection to that. I was more focusing on the Notre Dame fire, and for me, with that fire was like a kind of like an insurance scandal or a scam.
Sure.
The amount of millions that they got from
Sure.
rich, affluent French Catholics afterwards in donations was, mind blowing. They even got French taxpayer money funding the reconstruction of the church. Emmanuel Macron was educated by Jesuits in France. He's a devout Roman Catholic. He actually said that he wants to rule France like a Roman emperor, like Jupiter, or the Roman god Jupiter.
It makes sense. The Jesuits were formed in France, and again, Jesuit does equal 21. A lot of stuff's coming to light here in the 21st century about their power. So.
Oh, absolutely. They got tremendous control over France.
Mm-hmm.
It's even in the official seal of the French Republic is a Roman. So,
right. Right.
Well, I don't know who from signs and symbolism rules the world.
I actually don't know. That would be a good thing to know.
Confucius.
That might be right. Yeah.
But if you look at the signs and symbols, it's all there. Like when they signed the EU Constitution, and let me get the exact date for this because I have this cited. There might be some loaded gematria with this. The EU Constitution was signed in Rome in 2004, October 29th, 2004. You can see at the signing of this Constitution, there's a massive statue of Pope Innocent X, overlooking the signing of the EU Constitution. This Pope was Pope during the 30 Years' War, and famously wanted to extend the war, and he wanted to keep the war going until every single Protestant was exterminated off of the European continent. But they chose him to be the background statue for the signing of the EU Constitution. Which kind of again shows this is the doctrine of the temporal power of the Pope. They say every nation must bow to them.
Right.
That's universal. Throughout Catholic doctrine. You read all of the Jesuit authors. From the 1500s, from the 1600s, like Juan Mariana, Cardinal Bellarmine, even Ignatius Loyola himself, Francisco Borgia. If you read all the writings of the Jesuits, they say that the Pope, has absolute political and spiritual authority. And the Jesuits are essentially, Pat Buchanan was on CNN's Crossfire. Ran for president. He's a well-connected figure. He's good friends with Alex Jones, which I think shows the infiltration into the alternative media. But Pat Buchanan is a Knight of Malta trained by Jesuits at Georgetown University. He's also a Knight of Columbus. Pat Buchanan said the Jesuits are like the Pope's Marines.
Right, yeah, I've heard
Which
that
is
before.
a good description of them, because what is the Marine Corps? When you go through the Marine Corps, you're actually being forced Ignatian spirituality. The spiritual exercises, it's like willing out the humanity in you and turning you into like a corpse, or like a robot who is just going to autonomously, unquestionably follow the orders of your superiors without thinking, which is what your job is to do as a
Jesuit,
soldier.
right? Yeah.
Or a soldier or as a Jesuit, absolutely.
The date October 29th in 2004, that was a leap year, so it was the 303rd day of the year, 303. If you add Saint to the beginning of Ignatius of Loyola, so Saint Ignatius of Loyola, as he's now known because he's dead, that equals 303. So, could be part of the reason why that date.
Oh, very interesting. And that's that's another thing with the Catholic Church that to me it shows the power they have. The sainthoods and if you go back through especially the Middle Ages, like the Pope had a real power. Like the Pope threatened to excommunicate you. That was like a real spiritual hold that was held over the minds of men.
Indeed. And with regards to the word saint alone, it equals 63, and that day leaves 63 days left in the year. Eric, we got about 10 seconds before the music kicks in. It's been a pleasure. Any parting words?
Well, thanks so much for having me on, Zach. And I would just say all roads lead to Rome. And with Corona, like the patron saint of plagues is called Saint Corona. So, showing you all roads to Rome.
All right. Love to have you back, Eric. Appreciate you, man. Have a good night. I had to disconnect Eric because I had him connected through Skype, and I have to get off the Skype, otherwise the next radio show host can't get on. We're all dependent on that Skype line to connect. And again, sorry to everybody who, wanted to do the normal call-in show, which is what we typically do on Wednesday nights. But again, somebody recommended his channel not long ago, and I found it, and I was like, wow, this guy has a lot of good information. He is just the right person to talk to with all this focus we're putting on the Jesuits right now. And again, it's them, you guys. They are the tip of the spear. Somebody wrote me a long email and asked me not to focus so much on the Jesuits because they said in a few months I'm going to change my mind. I don't think so, you guys. I've been thinking for a long time that it is them, just the power of the church. They're the ones that gave us the calendar we're on, essentially the language that we use, and it's all synced up, and just the very powerful Jesuit rituals we've uncovered over the years, and then this whole thing going on right now with coronavirus, which is all paying tribute to the Jesuits. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be changing my mind. It looks like it's the Jesuits and the Catholic Church who are the tip of the spear, no doubt about it.
Zach, can you hear me, bud?
I hear you. What's up, man?
Man, Zach, you might have started something, brother. You're going to be proud of me, brother, when I tell you this one. Now, you remember when you said this Minnesota, you said, what did Steven Jackson got to do with it? Remember, you said, I'm going to check the Minneapolis Lakers to see if they won that championship when the NBA first started, right?
Right.
Now, do you know who they was playing?
Who?
They were playing the Syracuse Nationals, which so happened to be the Philadelphia Warriors, which is the Philadelphia 76ers.
Right.
No problem.
Right.
That's just no big problem. So, something says, I started thinking to myself, I said, let me see what's up with this dude, because I noticed that this guy, this dude for, what's the name, was the player coach for, Syracuse.